So we are continuing our series in the Gospel of John, and you're probably asking yourself, why the change of scenes? You're in a beautiful spot in that studio, and now we're right here in the middle of the woods. Well, I wanted to preface the rest of the series of John with this idea. Up until chapter 12, we can sit down anywhere and we can read it, we can make sense of it. We can literally transport ourselves to the festivals and to all these things. But I think it gets better as we get towards the end to find places that communicate what we want to communicate. I remember a long time ago when we were recording some of my private videos, we had this idea that the environment communicates more than the words that I'm speaking. So this is the reason why we're here. Towards the end of chapter 14, 15, 16 in John, we are going to get into a scene where Jesus is going to walk in the garden. He's going to pray, and he's going to be delivered over into the hands of his enemies. And the Synoptic Gospels talks about Judas coming in, and then John talks about a group of people coming in, and they're in the middle of a garden. It is a night. Obviously, we can't do that because of lighting, but it's a night, and you can, if you really want to have a feel for it, you can watch movies that have been done about it, or you can watch The Chosen that's coming out soon. We're in the middle of 2025, so the last parts are coming in. As a matter of fact, we are in April 2025 as of this recording, and tomorrow, on the 10th of April, there will be the release of the Last Supper in the series The Chosen. Not that I'm advocating for that, but they have done an amazing job depicting most of the scenes. There are transcribed in the gospel, so you can watch that. So it's going to be amazing, which is what I'm trying to do here at a lower level production. Anyway, so we wanted to record this in scenarios that we could communicate. And the second thing that I'm going to say before we actually go into chapter 13 and 14 and explore and expand and get some ideas that you might not get as you just read the obvious, is that some of the things that are said on the following chapters are anachronic. At least that's how I feel, which means they are out of time. They were said or they were recorded in paper before or after it actually happened. So you can see, first of all, they're not chronological, and second, someone wrote about it way after it has happened. So there's a plethora of possibilities right there. You know, kind of like when Jesus says in John chapter 12, I am the door and I am the good shepherd. So he depicts himself as two things in the same chapter because he's trying to explain to the audience what he means with everything that he says. So when he talks about the door, there's probably a reference to the temple, entering into that. And we spoke about it when we covered John chapter 10. And when he's talking about the good shepherd, he's probably making a reference to the sayings in Ezekiel that God is dealing with the bad shepherds of Israel because they are domineering, they are enslaving the people with their commandments, and they themselves are not really doing anything. And you can read in Matthew 23, for example, when Jesus is criticizing them for being so religious about the law, but at the same time, not allowing people to live their full revelation of who God is. So anyway, that's the idea. As we unpack these things, you have to have an open mind, and you have to be flexible with your theology. You don't really want to build theology out of one chapter. That's the beauty of the Gospel of John. It's supposed to be read in one sit down for 2 to 3 hours, and you can kind of make up what happened there. And some of the characters in the stories, they're not clear. So we've said it before. There's a few mentions with no names, like the disciple who Jesus loves, or that other disciple, and you never really know if that is Lazarus, if that is Andrew, if that is Matthew. You don't really know, and you have to kind of guess. Now, traditional and orthodox theology have accepted that John is that disciple that is not named, but you can see the way it's written when John is writing down at the end of his life that he's talking about maybe someone else, not himself. And it's a beautiful thing to assume that. I like to think that John is referencing Matthew every now and again. Why? Yeah, one of the things, for example, is that when Peter follows Jesus and that other disciple follows Jesus, that's John chapter 19, I believe. We're going to get there. It says that other disciple was known by the high priests. So there are not many people in the group of disciples that were known by the high priests. And I don't believe John was one of them. And the reason being is because John was a simple fisherman. Now, Matthew was a tax collector, a Jewish who left to serve Rome. And Rome was like the soldiers and the governors, they were directly involved with the priests, because the high priests, they had a political role to play. So I like to think that he's probably mentioning Matthew, and probably the conflict between what he wrote and whoever he is, John, or the author of John, or Matthew. So it's a beautiful thing. I'm saying all this to say the depiction of the reasoning behind chapter 13, 14, all the way to the end of John is not to give you a detailed explanation of how things happened, but to reinforce in your mind that it did happen. That's the idea. Not how it happened, but that it happened. So that at the end you may believe. That's the reason why he wrote the whole gospel, so that you may believe. In saying all that, we're going to change a few locations to make sure you understand what we're trying to say. And we're going to cover on the next video chapter 13, one of my favorite chapters in the Gospel of John. And I can tell you this, if you've watched it this far, here's a surprise for you. Chapter 13 in the Gospel of John contains a one-liner. A one-liner that if you learned that, you would have learned everything that Jesus wants you to learn. I hope you're curious about that. Let's move on. Chapter 13.